The tension in the office was thick enough to chew. I sat motionless at my desk, watching through the glass walls as the meeting wrapped up. From my angle, I could just make out my boss's expression shift from smug satisfaction to utter confusion, then fury. His eyes darted across the final lines of the report in front of him. He grabbed the stapled pages, flicking backward as if to confirm what he had just read. But it was all there, in black and white, exactly where I knew he would find it. He looked up, his face pale, lips parted as though he were about to speak, but could not find the words. The others in the room turned toward him with puzzled looks, their celebratory mood quickly fading. Across the table, I saw Jenna freeze mid-laugh, her eyes narrowing as she realized something had gone very wrong. Moments later, the door swung open with a force that made the blinds tremble. He stood there, report in hand, searching for me. "Rachel," he called, his voice taut with disbelief. "Can I see you for a moment?" I stood slowly, straightening my jacket. The murmur of my coworkers behind me was a satisfying soundtrack to my steps. This was the moment everything changed. He had given Jenna the promotion I earned, thinking I would stay quiet. But the report he just read? That was the last thing he would ever ignore. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I was 29 years old when the promotion I had worked tirelessly for was handed to someone who barely did the bare minimum. For 3 years, I had poured everything I had into that company, believing that effort, results, and integrity would speak for themselves. But Jenna, my lazy coworker with a talent for flattery and theatrics, had other ideas. She smiled, she charmed, and she climbed right over me. Our boss, Mr. Conway, saw only what he wanted to see. When he promoted her instead of me, it felt like a punch to the chest. But I did not cry. I did not protest. I waited. I watched. And then I planned. What he did not know was that the quarterly report he had asked me to prepare, the one Jenna took credit for, held more than just numbers. It held the beginning of my revenge. I had always believed in the power of hard work. From the moment I entered the workforce at 22, I committed myself to excellence. I did not come from privilege. I did not have connections or a family name to open doors. What I had was determination, an education I had paid for with scholarships and part-time jobs, and a desire to build a life I could be proud of. When I was hired at Renly and Partners, a boutique corporate advisory firm, I felt like I had finally found my footing. It was a mid-sized firm with a reputation for nurturing talent, and I was eager to prove myself. I arrived early, stayed late, and volunteered for the tasks no one else wanted. I treated every assignment as an opportunity to learn and improve, and in a company that often rewarded initiative, I believed my dedication would take me far. At first, it seemed to be working. Senior colleagues began to notice my thoroughness and dependability. I was trusted with client-facing responsibilities earlier than most. I made no enemies, kept my head down, and focused on delivering results. But in every office, there are people who play by a different set of rules, people like Jenna Sloan. Jenna was hired about a year after me. She was charismatic in the way that drew attention without effort, always dressed impeccably, always knowing just what to say in meetings to make herself seem informed without actually contributing substance. Where I built relationships through reliability, Jenna navigated with charm. She had a habit of showing up just late enough to be noticed, but not reprimanded. She hovered around the partners like a shadow, laughing a little too loudly at their jokes and complimenting their insights in ways that made everyone uncomfortable, but no one dared to say it aloud. At first, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Everyone had their own style. But it became clear over time that Jenna's work ethic was wafer thin. She regularly pushed her tasks onto others, often disguising her laziness as delegation. She once passed off an entire client proposal I had drafted as her own, claiming she had polished it before submission. When I confronted her, she shrugged and told me not to be so territorial. "We're a team, Rachel," she said with that smirking nonchalance that made my skin crawl. The partners, especially Mr. Conway, seemed charmed by her. He was an older man, sharp and accomplished, but not immune to the performance she crafted around him. He once told me in passing that Jenna had great instincts, though I had never seen evidence of those instincts in any real project. I began to realize that in our office, appearances could weigh just as heavily as accomplishments. Despite the mounting frustration, I remained focused. I knew that the senior associate role was opening up, and I wanted to earn it on merit. I took on more responsibility. I handled the firm's largest client portfolio that quarter, often fixing errors Jenna left behind. I stayed silent about her inefficiencies, thinking that the results would speak louder than complaints. I told myself that success earned dishonestly would always come undone. Still, the moments that gnawed at me the most were the quiet ones, when I stayed late cleaning up a financial model she had butchered, or when she sauntered past my desk with a flippant, "Thanks for wrapping that up, you're a lifesaver." She had a way of making herself sound helpful even when she had done nothing. And I was tired, but determined. When Mr. Conway approached me to ask for the upcoming quarterly projections, I saw it as another chance to prove myself. I worked through 2 weekends, cross-checking every number, building not only the model, but a narrative that explained its meaning. It was a solid piece of work, clear and persuasive, the kind that could influence major decisions. I submitted it directly to Mr. Conway as requested. The next day, I saw Jenna walking out of his office with the printed document in her hands. "Quarterlies?" I asked casually. She smiled, tapping the folder. "He wanted me to present them on Friday. I'll make sure your name is on the thank you slide, though." She walked away before I could speak. And in that moment, a familiar ache settled behind my ribs. The sinking understanding that once again, she would take credit for something she had not earned. That I would be expected to smile and applaud as she stood at the front of the room and basked in praise. But this time was different. Because this time, I had embedded something in the report, something subtle, but significant. Something that could not be ignored if Mr. Conway truly read every word. I did not know if he would. But if he did, it would change everything. And that was the moment the seed of revenge was truly planted. Friday arrived with an eerie stillness. I sat at my desk, my screen glowing with unread emails, but my attention was fixed entirely on the conference room down the hall. Through the glass walls, I could see Jenna in her element, standing confidently at the front with her slides projected behind her. She had chosen a pale blue blouse, soft enough to seem approachable, but just crisp enough to look authoritative. Her voice carried faintly through the glass, smooth, upbeat, polished, as she walked the partners through the quarterly projections I had painstakingly crafted. I watched Mr. Conway nod occasionally, brows furrowed in focus. He wasn't an easy man to impress. But Jenna, ever the performer, knew how to keep her tone light and her hands moving as she pointed to charts she had barely glanced at until this morning. I had rehearsed the scene in my head all week, how she would once again get credit, how they would smile and thank her, how I would be told I was a great support. But this time, I had left something behind. A single sentence, just one at the very bottom of the executive summary, tucked into the fine print. A line that would mean nothing to anyone who skimmed, but everything to someone actually paying attention. I had written, "For further clarification on the adjusted projections and legacy contract reconciliation, please speak directly with Rachel Ellis, sole author of this analysis." It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it was irrefutable. The document was a formal internal report, and according to policy, attribution mattered. Mr. Conway prided himself on thoroughness. He once dismissed a proposal entirely because someone failed to cite a source. I knew he'd read the last line. The only question was, when? The meeting ended, and Jenna emerged radiant, her lips curled into the kind of smile that expects congratulations. She breezed past my desk without a word, as if her success had nothing to do with me. I kept my eyes on my screen. My hands were still, though my pulse throbbed at my temples. An hour passed. Then 2. And finally, just after lunch, I saw Mr. Conway step out of his office. He had a printout in his hand. My report. And he was scanning the bottom of the page with a frown that deepened by the second. His eyes flicked up, then narrowed. He looked around the floor once, twice, and then his gaze landed on me. "Rachel," he said, his voice neutral but firm. "Could you step into my office, please?" I stood, my heart hammering, and followed him in. He closed the door behind us. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He sat at his desk, opened the folder, and read the last line again. "Did you write this report in its entirety?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Every section." His jaw worked slightly. "And Jenna? What was her role?" "She asked for a copy after I submitted it. I assumed she was going to use it as reference material." He didn't respond right away. He was reading again, not the bottom this time, but deeper into the content. His fingers drummed lightly on the table. Finally, he leaned back. "This is strong work," he said. "Concise. Accurate. Better than I expected, actually." I waited. He looked up. "She presented it this morning as if it were her own." I said nothing. "And you let her?" This time, I met his gaze. "Would you have believed me if I had said otherwise?" The silence between us was sharp, clean as broken glass. Mr. Conway exhaled slowly. "Rachel, why didn't you come to me directly?" I considered the question. "Because this happens often. And because I've learned that speaking up without proof makes me look like I'm complaining. So this time, I left proof." He didn't like that. His expression tightened, not in anger, but discomfort. "Guilt, maybe." "You're right," he said eventually. "You shouldn't have had to do that." Then came the moment I wasn't expecting. He stood, walked to the door, and opened it. "Could you ask Jenna to come in, please?" I rose slowly and walked to her desk. "Mr. Conway wants to see you." She blinked in surprise, but recovered quickly. "Sure," she said, her voice light. She passed me on the way, not noticing the look in my eyes. And as the door closed behind her, I sat down. The moment I had waited for was happening behind that glass, the moment when the last sentence would undo everything. Jenna didn't come out of the office for nearly 20 minutes. When she finally did, her steps were brisk, her expression unreadable. She didn't return to her desk. Instead, she gathered her purse, avoided everyone's eyes, and walked straight out of the building. That should have felt like a win. I should have breathed a sigh of relief. But Monday morning, she was back, bright lipstick, perfect hair, and the same smug smile she always wore. The only thing missing was the congratulations. This time, no one acknowledged her return. Not the analysts. Not the assistants. Not even the new intern who usually greeted everyone. She breezed into our department meeting with a cheerful "good morning" and slid into the seat next to mine like nothing had happened. I expected Mr. Conway to say something, to make it official, to move her, reassign her, correct the record. But he didn't. Instead, he handed her the meeting agenda with the same stoic professionalism he gave me. "Rachel will be presenting the proposal today," he said, eyes flicking briefly to me. "Her numbers were the basis for our last pitch. I'd like to make that clear." That was all. Jenna smiled, nodded, acted unfazed. "Of course," she said, her tone smooth as ever. But I saw the way her hand twitched. I delivered the presentation. The room nodded in approval. Mr. Conway even smiled, a rare thing. When it was over, he said, "That was excellent. Just the kind of precision we need." He didn't look at Jenna once. She clapped politely. Her smile still didn't falter. But later that day, I noticed her in the break room with a senior VP, laughing too loud, talking too fast, rebuilding what she thought she had lost. She wasn't sorry. She was plotting. And I knew this wasn't over. Over the next few weeks, things turned subtle. My reports would disappear from shared drives. Meeting invites I created would suddenly be marked private, with Jenna added as host. Clients I had nurtured for years began receiving emails from her directly, casual. Helpful notes that just happened to undercut my messaging or contradict my strategy. I documented it all. I kept records of edits made under her login. I saved emails, screenshots, server logs. But I didn't confront her. I didn't go to Mr. Conway again. I knew better now. She thrived on plausible deniability. She needed me to accuse her too early to look paranoid. So instead, I waited. Then she overreached. We were preparing a pitch for a high-profile client, one Mr. Conway had his eyes on for over a year. I had drafted a 40-page strategy tailored to the client's unusual international structure, complete with projections and risk mitigation measures. 2 days before the meeting, Jenna sent a revised version to the client without copying me. She removed half the cautions I had included. She shortened the timeline, made everything sound simpler and riskier. The client responded with enthusiasm. They loved her version, said it was aggressive and bold. Mr. Conway was pleased. He called her into his office and praised her initiative. She looked at me on the way out, smiled sweetly. I said nothing, but that night, I sent a personal email to the client. Polite, professional. I thanked them for their feedback and attached a short addendum. It highlighted 2 potential regulatory landmines Jenna had overlooked. Just 3 paragraphs. No accusations. No corrections. Just information. The next morning, the client postponed the meeting indefinitely. They had consulted their legal team. Jenna's version had raised flags. Mr. Conway called me in. He asked what had happened. I told him I had no idea what she had sent. Then I pulled up the shared drive, where her edit should have been, and showed him that the file had been deleted. Conveniently. Again, he said nothing. But I saw the line tighten between his eyebrows. The next week, Jenna was reassigned to a different department. Still employed. Still on payroll. But no longer in my way. I should have felt victorious. But what I felt was tired. Because I knew she wasn't done. A month later, I received a message from a recruiter. Hi Rachel, your former colleague Jenna used you as a reference for a management role at Bridgewell Solutions. We'd like to set up a quick call. My stomach twisted. Bridgewell was a former client. A big one. And apparently, Jenna had told them we had worked together, closely and productively. I agreed to the call. I told them the truth. Calmly. Professionally. That I had done the strategic work. That she had presented it. That there had been discrepancies. They asked if I had documentation. I said yes. But I didn't offer it unless they requested it formally. They did. 3 days later, they withdrew their offer to her. And 2 days after that, I received a message from Jenna. Just 5 words. You really don't let go. I didn't respond. Because she still didn't understand. This wasn't personal revenge anymore. It was about setting a boundary, one I should have set years ago. She had crossed a line over and over again. And now she was just learning what it meant to be held accountable. The damage she had done to her own reputation was irreversible. And this time, no amount of networking, charm, or lip gloss could undo it. The final act of Jenna's undoing didn't come through confrontation or some grand exposure. It came through a document. It was the performance review. Each year, our department issued detailed assessments of leadership candidates, reviews that were compiled and submitted directly to the executive board for final decisions on promotion, pay, and succession planning. This time, for the first time, the board had requested peer feedback in writing, and anonymity was promised. I was meticulous. I wrote my report like a case study. No bitterness. No personal remarks. Just facts. I documented how Jenna had consistently taken credit for collaborative projects. I cited specific emails, meeting transcripts, and client communications that demonstrated her pattern of misrepresentation. I noted how her initiatives had often needed rework, how she dismissed feedback, how she disrupted team dynamics for self-promotion. And I wasn't alone. Others, now emboldened, contributed as well. Quiet analysts. Long-suffering coordinators. Even one junior associate who had once cried after Jenna berated her in front of the team. The pattern became undeniable. The final review was nearly 20 pages long. 2 weeks later, we gathered for the annual town hall, a formal event where the company's strategic vision was outlined and key promotions were announced. The room buzzed with anticipation. Jenna sat in the front row, poised, smiling, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She had been seen lunching with 2 VPs earlier that week. She looked like a woman expecting a title. Mr. Conway took the stage. He gave the usual address. Metrics, growth initiatives. Then came the promotions. Names were called. Applause erupted. But Jenna's name never came. She didn't flinch. Not even when the final round of applause faded. She simply sat there, frozen in place. Mr. Conway paused, then added one final note. This year, he said, we conducted a more thorough evaluation of our leadership pipeline. And based on direct peer input, we've identified areas where certain individuals need growth before moving forward. There was a long silence. Then his eyes, ever so briefly, landed on Jenna. A single sentence. And it shattered everything. Her expression didn't change. But her hands, clasped in her lap, turned white at the knuckles. Afterward, she didn't linger. She didn't smile. She left before the drinks were served. She never returned to our department again. I don't know what was said in the meetings that followed. I don't know if she was forced to resign or offered a graceful exit. All I know is that her desk was cleared out one quiet Monday morning without a single word to the team. And in her place, a new hire arrived, someone calm, collaborative, and quietly competent. For the first time in years, the office felt balanced. And I breathed freely again. Jenna had built her reputation on charm and shortcuts. She thought appearances were enough. But when the last sentence of the review was read, the one that said, Jenna Foster is a risk to morale, integrity, and client trust, her story was over. She couldn't smile her way out of that. Because when the truth finally speaks, even the loudest lies fall silent. It has been over a year since Jenna's quiet departure, and the air at work feels lighter now, not just from her absence, but from the absence of walking on eggshells. There is laughter in meetings again. People share ideas without fear of them being stolen. Collaboration has replaced competition. And the silence that used to follow Jenna's every interruption has turned into something more powerful: mutual respect. My own role did not change overnight, but I no longer had to defend my work or second-guess my instincts. I found joy again in the challenges, the creative thinking, and the late evenings that once left me drained now feel purposeful. Slowly, trust in my capabilities began to grow, not from grand gestures, but from consistency, the very trait that had been overlooked for so long. What surprised me most was how many people came forward after Jenna left, not to gossip, but to thank me. They said my quiet integrity had inspired them to speak up, that they felt seen, that they no longer believed they had to play games to succeed. I never wanted revenge to be dramatic. I didn't want to see her fall. I just wanted the truth to matter again. In the end, it wasn't my voice alone that brought about change. It was all of us, those of us who stayed silent for too long, who knew the difference between showmanship and substance, and who finally decided that it was time to be honest. As for Jenna, I don't know where she went. I've never looked her up. I don't need to. I suspect she's somewhere else now, trying the same tricks, believing charm can outrun accountability. But maybe, just maybe, the lesson followed her, quiet as a shadow. I learned something, too. I learned that being overlooked doesn't mean you're unworthy. That being passed over doesn't make your efforts invisible. Sometimes, it simply means the timing isn't right yet. But when it is, when the truth catches up, it lands with undeniable force. So I ask you, if you had the chance to show someone exactly who they are, not with vengeance, but with undeniable truth, would you do it? Or would you stay silent and let the lazy ones keep climbing over your quiet strength? The choice, I now know, is not between revenge and peace. It's between silence and justice. And I chose justice.